A new study shows that heart attack deaths increased by 30% during the pandemic. And the only variable during that time was, of course, coronavirus itself. I mean, I can't think of any other variables, and neither can the mainstream media, interestingly. But are there any other variables? Hello there, you 6 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage to truth and freedom. And God knows we're going to have to find it together because we live within a set of systems with an agenda to prevent us from realizing the truth. Together, though, we will do it. Turn on the notification bell and subscribe to the channel right now. We make this content every day and I want you to see it all. The mainstream media content is prioritized on this platform, so you will get to see fascinating stories like the one we're discussing today, where CBS discuss the potential causes for the sudden, sharp, frightening rise of heart attack deaths across the pandemic. Now, what's fascinating about this interview is that things that never get mentioned as potential variables are lockdowns and obesity and health, the vaccines and potential impacts of vaccines, which you know by now are being looked at in some quarters, and I certainly have no opinion on what those studies will reveal, and masks and other behavioural variables and alterations that may have been significant. Today what we're discussing is the way that the mainstream media reports on this, because we can then use that to analyse the way they report on other subjects, whether they consciously or unconsciously serve a broader agenda. And the need for us to have our own channels, our own media, our own communication, so that we can reach truth together, occasionally disagreeing with one another. Let me know what you think in the chat and the comments. Let me know what you think about this video. Give it a like, share it around. Let's keep our heads above water. Now let's get into this mainstream media skullduggery.
Heart attack deaths have become more common across all age groups since the start of the coronavirus pandemic.
But a recent study found that young people are actually most at risk in this case. According to Cedars-Sinai Hospital, the number of heart attack deaths among 25 to 44-year-olds in the U.S. over the first 2 years of the pandemic was 30% higher than predicted.
Now, if you've been following this channel for a while, and if this is a conversation that interests you, you'll be familiar with some of this kind of information because you will have heard it from foreboding, forbidden, unsanctioned sources. This conversation has been going on for a while: pericarditis, myocarditis. You'll be familiar with these kind of conversations. But of course, YouTube has very particular guidelines around this subject, so I have to be very particular. And this is precisely the reason that we're on the platform Rumble right now, so that we can communicate openly, so we can hear more diversity of views, stronger opinions against establishment interests. So immediately what they're discussing is the peculiar rise of heart attacks in people aged between 25 and 44. Now, is there anything that could have contributed to this? And of course, coronavirus itself could have contributed to it. It would be unscientific to reach a conclusion without doing the studies, without reading the data, without looking at the evidence, wouldn't it? So never do that.
Dr. Gander, thank you for being here. What stood out to you in this study?
I think the fact that you're seeing such a big increase specifically in the youngest age group, so the 25 to 44-year-olds, you saw this 30% increase in the risk of death from heart attack. And that really is quite striking. That's not a group, an age group in which you normally see heart attacks, much less dying from a heart attack.
Now, that is actually a startling statistic. People who don't normally really get heart attacks have seen a significant increase in heart attacks. That warrants rigorous scientific study. That in itself is a type of epidemic, a type of pandemic. It's such a sharp, sudden, and unexpected rise that you've got to look at that. Is there something in the water? Is there some new anomalous contaminant that's affecting people? Let's look at everything that's changed in that period and question, interrogate, because we follow the science, don't we? So let's interrogate what it could be. Can you think of anything that's been going on during that period that could be causing young people to have a sudden increase in heart attacks? And stay within the guidelines while you're thinking about it.
To do a study like this, you look at the years prior to the pandemic and the typical rate of heart attack death in that age group, and then you see it increase and you wonder what's the new variable. And so the pandemic is that new variable?
It's the pandemic, because they know they're venturing into conspiracy theory territory here. Managing the information, I would say, is a type of misinformation, malinformation, disinformation. I can't remember which one of Donald Duck's nephews this particular one is, but it is controlling the way that we receive it.
That's right. So these researchers looked at 10 years of data across the U.S., all the death certificates that get filed with the CDC, that data. And so what they saw is prior to the pandemic, heart attack deaths were actually dropping. And then that trend reverses, and you see those deaths go up, especially among that youngest age group during the pandemic.
Heart attack deaths were going down and down and down like that. And then they went up and up and up, forming a kind of a sharp spike. There's some sort of sharp spike seems to be connected to these heart attacks.
Do we know why why younger people might be more at risk, or?
We don't know for sure.
Okay, so we don't know for sure. We don't know for sure, perhaps because of the way science works. Perhaps, for example, people aren't doing enough clinical trials in certain particular areas that might lead to particularly unprofitable conclusions or even litigious conclusions. Sorry, no, there was an indemnity thing. So there is going to be no litigious conclusions drawn. If the mainstream media are able to freely admit that they don't know, then surely in these kind of media spaces, we ought to be able to freely discuss the various possibilities when it comes to a radical increase in heart attacks among young people. Let me know what you think in the chat or the comments.
And in fact, these death certificates are probably not even capturing the fact that they might have had COVID.
Oh, so the death certificates might not say that they've had COVID. Yeah, because there was a real trend of not putting COVID on death certificates during the pandemic. Oh, there was all sorts of opportunities to get COVID on that death certificate and just people weren't taking them. But at least we're acknowledging that there is the possibility of inaccuracy around death certificates. Dr. Liana Wen was criticised for admitting that the medical community is overcounting the amount of COVID deaths and hospitalizations. She writes, are these Americans dying from COVID or with COVID? Another trope from the world of conspiracy enters the mainstream, the from or with conspiracy. Wen noted how people with gunshot wounds or other serious illnesses often test positive for the virus and wrote, if these patients die, COVID might get added to their death certificate along with the other diagnosis, but the coronavirus was not the primary contributor to their death and often played no role at all. So, sometimes COVID was put on people's death certificates when they've been shot. The main news again, JFK died from with COVID because he was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald. We'll show you the files in 50 years or so. We'll get to the bottom of this.
They're really just saying, did you die from a heart attack or not? What we do know, however, is that younger people were less likely to protect themselves against COVID than older people, less likely to mask, less likely to take other mitigation measures.
Get this mask on before you have a heart attack.
And they were also farther back in line to get vaccinated.
Run to the front of that line. You might get a heart attack. Don't run too fast. That also might give you a heart attack.
So they were not protected with vaccination until later in the pandemic.
Is there anything else that might have caused the heart attack? Anything. Masks made little to no difference to COVID or death rates, according to one of the most comprehensive meta-analyses of face coverings. So it could be a little different, or it could be. This research carried out by the Cochrane Institute, the gold standard of evidence-based reviews. Gold, more like tinfoil, hat, standard, you conspiracy theorists, looked at 78 global studies involving, did they do enough people though? 1 million people. Oh. The researchers said harms caused by masks, including hampering children's schooling, were poorly measured in the studies, meaning any small benefit on infection rates may be outweighed. Professor Francois Balloux, a professor of computational biology at University College London, who was not part of the analysis, said it showed that the benefit of wearing masks is at best small. That's the very best.
So basically, I mean, you could have had perhaps a mild infection, and of course, this is all hypothetical.
They have to keep saying this is conjecture, this is hypotheses, this is just an idea, because they don't know. Is there a real answer?
But then there might have been a lingering heart situation, heart disease.
Right. So COVID causes inflammation of the blood vessels as well as other parts of the body, and also blood clots.
Maybe COVID causes blood clots. What else causes? Is there anything else that causes blood clots? It's probably COVID. Let's follow that science. And this is from Alex Jones at InfoWars. Did I say Alex Jones at InfoWars? I meant Reuters. This happened in May 2022. The US health regulator said on Thursday it was limiting the use of Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine for adults due to the risk of a rare blood clotting syndrome. Okay.
And what we think is that a COVID infection may have actually accelerated the process of developing heart disease, what we call coronary artery disease, and so therefore accelerated when somebody might have had a heart attack and died from a heart attack.
But COVID also changes how much you can get out to an exercise class, how often you see friends.
This is brilliant. What this item on the news should be called is ways in which we can say that COVID might have caused a 30% increase in heart attack deaths without really acknowledging that the response to COVID might have caused a 30% increase in heart attack deaths. Yeah, because you got COVID. Oh, so much COVID. Can't get down the gym. Heart attack. That's what they're saying. In a way, they should be applauded here because they're acknowledging that exercise and your health and your diet are all factors in your general well-being. Oh, maybe then you've got COVID, so, you can't do your regular regimen of push-ups and pull-ups and running in the park, so also you probably just go and lay down and have a heart attack. Do you know what else stops people doing exercise? Being locked in their house. And this is by James O'Keefe from Project Veritas. Sorry, did I say James O'Keefe from Project Veritas? I meant The Telegraph. The pandemic may have pushed millions more people into obesity, according to emerging data from around the world. Young people have been particularly badly affected, research from countries including the United States, China, and Europe suggests. In one US study, for example, the number of overweight, obese young people jumped by more in just 1 year of the pandemic than it did over the previous 2 decades. Oh my God, it just made us so much more unhealthy. The implications of more obesity in young people is going to translate over decades into more diabetes, more heart disease, more profits for the pharmaceutical industry, more of all the other complications of obesity, which is going to impact people's lives in a negative way, said Professor John Wilding, president of the World Obesity Federation. I hope those bloody lockdowns were worth it. I hope they had a really significant effect. COVID lockdown prevented only 0.2% of deaths in the first wave. Researchers say the cost of lockdown to society far outweighed the benefits. And that's especially difficult because everyone put so much weight on. So the scales were really tipped.
Maybe your level
Or
of
go get a
activity
checkup.
overall, your stress, whether
Yeah.
you see your doctor.
Going to the doctor.
Oh, I can't see my doctor. Oh, I'm stressed. Any other reasons? Surely you're doing a debate on CBS News. You've got an epidemiologist. Surely you're going to discuss all the variables. The lockdowns, the vaccines. Come on, let's go through all of them.
How are they ruling out or accounting for these other lifestyle changes?
It's lifestyle.
We don't know, so you can't really assess that just from looking at death certificates.
Once again, we don't know.
Again, all we can say is how old were they? Did they die from a heart attack?
But how would you not, at this point, even be a little bit curious? Have they not learned anything from this whole process about what it does when you control information? Now that we know that when they were discussing the origins of the virus, they were discussing, when I say they, I mean Fauci, I mean the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I mean the WHO, I mean the British response team to the pandemic, were all discussing it could be bioengineered, it could be a lab leak, it could be natural origin. Guess which one they settled on? Natural origin, because both of those two implicate the industries that have emerged around science.
But, some of the factors you're mentioning could certainly have played a role. We also know healthcare facilities were really overwhelmed during the pandemic.
Overwhelmed, were they? You mean those for-profit health facilities that sacked thousands of nurses for refusing to get the vaccines?
So was it that somebody had a heart attack and then was less likely to survive because the healthcare facility was overwhelmed?
Couldn't get there on time. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, God. And I think we've covered every single angle of the entire debate, except for anything that might affect the interests of powerful institutions and our advertisers.
Something new to go and see your doctor and check yourself about. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's the conclusion. Go and see your doctor and check yourself about. So they got through the whole report without mentioning lockdowns or vaccines, which it would seem ought be part of any reasonable debate and exploration into what has caused this 30% spike in heart disease. What do you reckon? Let me know in the chat, let me know in the comments. Here's some unconnected stories from Politico, which I'm sure have no bearing on this debate and definitely shouldn't have been included in that very thorough investigation undertaken by those brilliant people just then. The CDC and FDA announced recently that their surveillance system flagged a possible link between the new Pfizer-BioNTech bivalent COVID-19 vaccine and strokes in people aged 65 and over, but said they were continuing to recommend the shots anyway. Okay. Data has shown that an elevated risk of myocarditis and pericarditis, inflammation of the heart, muscle and membrane respectively, after the second mRNA vaccine dose among males ages 12 to 39, with those in their late teens and 20s most affected. Elevated risk of myocarditis and pericarditis, 12 to 39 years of age. 30% increase of deaths by heart attack in young people. Wait, let me just do this again. Wait, I think I can do this. Elevated risk of myocarditis and pericarditis, that's inflammation of the heart. Increased heart attacks in young people. There's something there. Could there be a connection? impression made then? Not when you're sponsored by Pfizer, baby!
CBS Health Watch, sponsored by Pfizer.
Well, anyway, the whole thing was necessary because natural immunity simply wasn't an option. That much we know for sure. They were very clear about that. They said that these measures are much more effective than natural immunity.
In today's Daily Health, there's a new study that looks at our body's immunity after getting COVID.
In today's Daily Health, another fudged admission to see if we can kind of just blur the lines of how and when that happened without us losing all of our credibility.
Yeah, it finds the immunity that naturally builds up in our bodies after a COVID-19 infection.
Yeah, natural immunity. I heard about that, I think, from conspiracy theorists.
Is as protective as the 2 doses of the mRNA vaccine.
Oh, so natural immunity. So the vaccine passports then? The pandemic of the unvaccinated? That would all be answers in the comments and chat.
Against severe illness and death. A fascinating study.
Yeah, it's fascinating, all right. And this is what they're discussing. Immunity acquired from a COVID infection provides strong, lasting protection against the most severe outcomes of the illness, according to research published last Thursday. Too late. In The Lancet, protection experts say that's on par with what's provided through 2 doses of a mRNA vaccine. But you can only charge for one of those things, so I don't know. What do you think's best? Let me know in the chat. The immunity generated from an infection was found to be at least as high, if not higher, than provided by 2 doses of an mRNA vaccine, the authors wrote. Well, it's at least as high, but there is another option. Is it that it's less high? No, it's higher. Ah, drat! Damn unprofitable solutions. So there you go. I mean, I don't think there's much to add to that CBS debate where they covered every single angle of what could be causing these deaths by heart attack, whether it was just COVID or I don't know really. But areas to consider might be the recommendations that were made, the medical procedures that were recommended, the lockdowns that were enforced, basically every conceivable response by the government and the globalist establishment that imposed them on all of us. But that's just what I think. And you know me, I'm crazy, I'm a conspiracy theorist. Let me know what you think in the chat and the comments. Have a look at either of these videos. You'll enjoy them, they're fantastic. Stay on our channel, spread our content around because this platform favors mainstream media content. We make content for you every single day. Share it, watch it, turn on the notification bell and subscribe immediately. But more important than any of that, please, if you can, stay free.